G'day guys, and welcome back to the Boundary Riders Podcast. Today we're actually up to episode 20, which is a pretty big milestone for our podcast, so I really appreciate you guys watching today. Today we've got a huge couple of topics to talk about. First, I'm just going to quickly cover over one of the tribunal decisions over the weekend, which if you look at the background of the Swans, you probably have an idea of what I'm going to have a whinge about. We're also going to go over some predictions for the rest of the season, and then we'll cover the usual stuff of the weekly votes, tips, and AFL Fantasy stuff towards the end. But of course, on the weekend, Thursday night was the Swans versus the Bulldogs, and Dane Rampe has been suspended for that game for 2 weeks. Now, he is challenging it, and this will be coming out on Tuesday morning, so I think Tuesday night they will be deliberating if he gets away with it or whatever. I cannot believe that got 2 weeks. You watch the replay, I'm sure everyone's seen it by now, that Dane Rampe ran into McNeil of the Western Bulldogs. It was the most accidental contact I think I've ever seen on an AFL field. Didn't look at him at all. Was watching the play going on up the field, and he hit McNeil from behind because he was watching the ball. He didn't have an eye on his opponent. Now, I guess someone could make the excuse of, he's right there, how could you not see him? I'm sure as a defender, and if anyone's played AFL football before, or played football before, would probably have an idea of playing as a defender that you probably got a bit of tunnel vision almost of like you're watching the ball up the field to watch where the ball's going to track it. And I'm sure he hasn't got an eye exactly on every single player on the I'm sure he doesn't really have an eye for Lachie McNeil at that stage because the ball's way up the field. So he's watching, predicting where to go. And I think that was just ridiculous that he got 2 weeks, considering Josh Richelli also got 2 weeks for something that was not an AFL, not in the play, which, like Dane Rampe was, but he full-on threw an elbow at a player and hit him in the face. He got 2 weeks as well. And also, the week before that, we saw Toby Nankervis only get 1 extra week. He got 3 weeks for running past the football and elbowing someone in the head and giving him concussion. How is that 3 weeks, but Dane Rampe for accidentally running into a player 2 weeks? That is ridiculous from the AFL Tribunal, the MRO, to have even considered giving him even a fine for that, let alone 2 bloody weeks for that. That was bullcrap. And you could see a lot of people in the comments were saying, that's ridiculous. How could that have been a week or 2 or anything? And I can't believe the AFL made that decision because that was just ridiculous. Now, I could probably sit here for another 20 minutes talking about it, but we've actually got a pretty big podcast to go through today. So I don't want to just be spending here all day complaining about the AFL Tribunal being an absolute joke because, let's be honest, I'm sure you guys know by now how bad it is. But what I wanted to do today was basically the main topic of this video, is to go through the rest of the season predictions. Now, over on Squiggle, it's a website that you can actually predict the rest of the AFL season. It's a really good website. If you guys want to actually do it, I strongly urge you guys going over there and doing it because it's so informative. It shows the rest of the fixtures for the season. You can go over your tips and just decide, see if you've picked them right, and you really think that's what the games are going to be. At the moment, from now, we have 6 more rounds to go. We're at round 19. There is 24 rounds this year. Now, we'll be putting this up on screen for you guys, but I will go through it as well for people who are just listening. But I have actually done a full ladder prediction for the rest of the season. So here we have, on top of the ladder, outright is Collingwood. In second, we have Port Adelaide. Third, Brisbane. Fourth, Melbourne. Fifth, Geelong. Sixth, Essendon. Seventh, Carlton. Eighth, Western Bulldogs, who just scrape in on percentage. Then we have at 9th, St Kilda, GWS at 10th, Adelaide at 11th, Richmond at 12th, Fremantle at 13th, Sydney at 14th, Gold Coast at 15th, Hawthorn at 16th, North Melbourne at 17th, and West Coast at 18th. Now, I'm going to go through the few that maybe people have a concern about. I'm probably going to go from about 6 to maybe 12. It's probably the ones I'm going to go to and talk about a little bit. So first off, I want to talk about Essendon. Actually, yeah, I'm going to talk about Essendon. So Essendon, of course, had a pretty rough couple of weeks there. They lost to Port Adelaide and kind of sitting in that middle range now. They obviously got beaten by Carlton against Geelong very convincingly. So a couple of people could be a little bit concerned. However, their next 6 weeks are pretty good. They've got West Coast again and they've got North Melbourne again, at both in Docklands, so they don't really have an issue there. They'll win those games pretty easily. They've got the Bulldogs and Sydney in the next 2 weeks. Those are big games. I have tipped them to win both of those games. If they can knock those games both off, they make the finals very easily. If they lose them, then it gets a bit tough because their last 2 games of the season are the Giants and Collingwood. The Giants are in massive form at the moment, and I think that if they can win a couple of their games as well, they could very well be up there. They've actually, on my ladder, they've only missed by percentage. And obviously they got Collingwood in the last round, that's a really hard win. But at this stage, I think Essendon, if they can win their next 2 games, they've got the games after that, which are West Coast and North Melbourne, wrapped up easily, they'll be fine. After that, we get to Carlton. Now, how 6 weeks have changed. We did this about 6 weeks ago, and I think I put Carlton in 15th. Suddenly, their form has turned around, and I've actually got them in the 8 now. Their next 6 games are actually pretty okay. Now, they've got West Coast next week. That's at Dockland Stadium. That's, 100-point win, whatever. They've got a pretty good percentage, Carlton, as well. So I give them a big chance of making the 8 because of their percentage. They've got Collingwood after that in round 20, so I'm giving them a loss there, and Melbourne in round 22. Other than that, they've got West Coast, like I mentioned, then they've got St Kilda in round 21, Gold Coast in round 23, and then the big game in round 24 against the Giants. That is a huge game, because I've got that one here. Whoever wins that game is going to make the 8. And at this stage, I've got it on Carlton. Now, that game, whoever wins it, right now, will make the 8 on the final ladder. Now, I don't know who's going to win that game. I've got it on Carlton at the moment. However, I just heard news that Harry Mackay has been ruled out for the rest of the home and away season. So that's going to be a huge matchup for the rest of the season. But at this stage, I've got Carlton winning that game and making the 8. But however, Giants are in really good form. Just beating Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, that's a massive. After that, we get to the Bulldogs. This is going to be another team as well. They are right in the cusp of it right now after losing to Sydney. They've got the Bombers next week, and like I mentioned, I think they lose that. And they've got the Giants in... I think that's at... it says Eureka Stadium. I'm pretty sure that's down in Ballarat. So... I think they win that one pretty simply. I don't think that's really an issue for the Bulldogs. I know the Giants are in really good form, but down in Ballarat, it's really hard conditions. They usually are pretty good down there. Then they've got Richmond, and then they've got Hawthorn. And now, you'd think that's a pretty easy win for them. This is down in Tasmania. The Bulldogs don't play in Tassie very often. In fact, I don't know the last time they have. And Hawthorn are really good down there, so I've actually picked Hawthorn in that one. So, if the Bulldogs can win that game in particular, they'll make the 8 pretty easily. There should be a game in the 8. However, their last game is against Geelong down in Candinia Park. They haven't won down there in a long time. They've been close, but they haven't been able to win down there. If their final round becomes... If the final round of the season is the decision between the Bulldogs making it and missing it, I don't think they'll make it. The Bulldogs are on... Right now on my ladder, they're making it by 1%. That is it. And... they're only 1% in front of the next team I'm going to talk about, which is St Kilda. St Kilda are falling off the face of the earth right now. We saw Ross Lyon in the latest post-game interview. He basically said the Saints at this stage don't deserve to make finals. I kind of agree with him. I actually really respect him coming out and saying that. Because the amount of times you hear coaches go, oh, we're in a rebuild, all that sort of stuff. And he did say that, but he also mentioned the fact that, we are not playing well enough to make finals. And if we do, we're just making up the numbers. I really respect that from Ross Lyon. But they've got a pretty good run home. They've got the next 3 weeks, the Saints. If they can win their next 3 games, they can set up the rest of the season. They've got North Melbourne, Hawthorn, and Carlton. Now, how they're playing at the moment, they won't win any of their last 6 games. But if they can win at least... They've got Richmond and Geelong and Brisbane to end the season. So those are pretty 3 hard games. And they've also got Brisbane at the Gabba, so I can't see them winning that at all. However, the next 5 games are at home. They're all at Dockland Stadium. I do give St Kilda a little bit of a chance if they can find their form from what they had at the start of the season. But at this stage, I don't see them making it. Purely on the fact that, 1, their percentage is very low. They don't seem like they can win games very big. And they're just playing really bad at the moment. I mean, if they can do what Carlton did and, change their form around 180, I give them a chance. But at the moment, I think they missed the 8. After that, we get to the Giants. This is the team that I think can make the 8. If they can keep their form that they've got at the moment, they will make the 8. And honestly, I think they can do some damage in the finals. I don't think they can win the premiership by any means. But they're playing such good footy. They've got one of the best defensive combos in the comp in Taylor and Buckley. They've also got Connor Iden back there who's playing some brilliant footy at the moment. They've got rebounding defenders in Lockie Whitfield. They are just playing some great footy and they're a really good team to watch. However, their next 6 games are kind of tough. They've got the Gold Coast next week at Manuka Oval. They should win that. Then they've got the Bulldogs down in Ballarat, I believe. Then they've got the Swans, Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, the Bombers, and Carlton to finish the season. That is a real tough month at the end of the season as well. Well, the last 5 weeks are really tough. They are 50-50 games and honestly set up the 8. If GWS can get through on probably 4 wins, I see them making it. However, I've got them only for 3 at the moment. I think they beat the Swans, I think they beat the Bombers, and I think they beat the Gold Coast in the next 6 weeks. I don't think they beat the Bulldogs. I don't see them beating Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, and I can't see them beating Carlton at Docklands if they're both in the same form they are right now. So at this stage, I've got GWS just missing the 8. Now, again, if they can pull one of those games, though, I think they're a real chance, and I think they can actually put a bit of damage on the top 8 teams as well. After that, we get to Adelaide. Adelaide really cost themselves a top 8 spot after the game against the Giants. If they won that game against the Giants, because of their percentage, they would be in 7th right now. If they had that game, and on my prediction, they would have the top 8, they would have 7th wrapped up right now. However, because they lost it, they've got a pretty weird run home. They've got Melbourne next week, they've got Port Adelaide in the showdown, then they've got the Gold Coast, which they should win, and then they've got Brisbane at the Gabba, which I can't see them winning, the Swans in round 23 at Adelaide Oval, and then to end the season, they've got the West Coast Eagles. So they'll win that one, and they'll win that one pretty comfortably. It is at Perth Stadium, so I don't think they'll win by as much as they would if it was at Adelaide Oval. But at the moment, the Crows, I think, have cost themselves a final spot, and I think maybe it's probably not the worst thing in the world for the Adelaide Crows to not maybe play finals this year. We've seen some teams in the past maybe make finals a little bit too early. So I don't think it's the end of the world if the Crows miss this season. However, I think they've cost themselves with that game against the Giants. That was a big loss to them. They had the lead at 3/4 time by 17 points, and they cost themselves, I think, a finals berth on that one game. However, if they can win the showdown, I think they make the 8. That's the game there. If they can win the showdown or maybe pull the win against Melbourne, which I don't think they can because they played poorly outside of Adelaide this year. But if they can pull the showdown, they make the 8. But at this stage, the Crows are out of it. And the final team we're going to talk about here is Richmond. Now, Richmond are in some good form. Obviously, they did have that bit of a hiccup against Brisbane. Other than that, though, they've been pretty good, Richmond. The way they end the season isn't the easiest. They've got a pretty mid-run. They've got Hawthorn this week. Then they've got Melbourne. Then they've got the Bulldogs, St Kilda, North Melbourne, and Port Adelaide. Now, look, they beat North Melbourne pretty easily. But at this stage, I haven't actually got them for a win in any of the other games. And Hawthorn. I've got them against Hawthorn. But any of the other games, against Melbourne, I don't think they win. Against the Bulldogs, I don't think they win because it's at Marvel Stadium. Against the Saints, I don't think they win either because it's at Marvel. And then they've got the Power at the end of the season at Adelaide Oval. So I don't think they make it, Richmond. They're too far behind now. I think they're just before Damien Hardwick left. I think that just costs them a little bit. Their percentage is also quite low. They didn't get the percentage that they needed against the West Coast Eagles last week. And North Melbourne, I think they can get a bit of percentage off that game, but I think they needed to get the two bursts off those games. And against Hawthorn as well, with James Sicily back, I don't think they're going to be as easy to thrash. So at this stage, I'm picking Richmond just to miss the 8. Now, Fremantle and Sydney, I will quickly go over them, in fact. Fremantle, they've got an okay run, but they've just lost it now. The way they've finished this season is poor. And honestly, in the rest of the season, they've got the Swans next week. I think they'll win that. And they've got the West Coast Eagles. Other than that, I think they're shot. They've got Hawthorn at the MCG, which I think they could win, but that's basically it for them. And with the Sydney Swans, look, they won last week against the Bulldogs to give themselves a slim chance of making the finals. But really, the next 3 weeks is Fremantle away, Essendon away, and then GWS in the Sydney Smash, or whatever the fuck they call it now. I don't think they win any of those games. And to be honest, for the rest of the season, I only think they beat the Gold Coast in the next 6 weeks. So, look, if Sydney can bank, what do they have to get? They have to get 4 wins from here to make the 8. I don't think they bank it, not 4. I think they need to get 5 wins from here to make the 8, which I don't see them doing. I don't see them beating Fremantle and Perth, Essendon at Docklands, GWS at all, Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, and I don't think they can beat Melbourne either. So I think Sydney are pretty much shot for now. And really, that's the 8 for me at this stage. Gold Coast, I think, just fall off the face of the earth, like I said. And I think Hawthorn are going to be that 16th spot. And North Melbourne, they've got West Coast later in the season, so they'll get a point out of that. But yeah, guys, those are my predictions for the rest of the season. Make sure to go check out Squiggle. Just look it up on Google or whatever. You'll find it. It's a really good website for you guys to check out the rest of the season. And maybe see if your team can actually make it, if they have a real genuine chance, or if they're probably just maybe out of just have missed out just on the wins at the moment. But yeah, I think it's a really good website. But now that we've gone through the predictions for the rest of the season, let's move into last round. Now, last round we had some really close games, a couple of upsets as well. It was a really good round of footy, and we start with the Thursday night game between the Swans and the Bulldogs. Sydney held on, finally in a close one, and it's almost shot the Bulldogs' final spot. I think, like I said, they make it, but the Bulldogs got to find some form. They couldn't kick a goal. They already had Aaron Norton for the majority of the match, and I think if they were playing a better team, the Bulldogs, they would have been beaten by a lot more. They were very lucky that they were playing Sydney, who have been very underperforming all year. And at this stage, I think the Bulldogs are only going to be making up the numbers if they make the finals this year. But nonetheless, we get to the votes. 3-2-1 votes. 3 votes go to Marcus Bontempelli, 2 votes to Errol Goulden, and the 1 vote to Tom Papley. Now, this was a big contentious one. My brother actually sent me some tips, and he thought that Errol Goulden was better. And I almost put him there, but I just gave it to Bontempelli because I think he played the 4 quarters. Errol Goulden kind of fell off in the last quarter, but I mean, to his credit, Sydney did win, so I mean, he didn't really play that well. But I think Bontempelli all match was the reason that the Bulldogs were still in this game. He had him on their back for the all game, and he just couldn't get him over the line at the end. So that's why I gave him the 3 votes. Errol Goulden, like I said, was brilliant. I think he's almost got that All-Australian wingman spot locked up now. It's going to be a real contentious one if they actually pick wingman this year. But if they do, I think Errol Goulden's right up there with people like Ed Langdon, Lockie Hunter, Josh Dacos, and I'm forgetting one, Nick Martin. So I think he's a real chance there. And the 1 vote to Tom Papley, kicked 4 goals. He was the fire starter for Sydney. When he plays well for Sydney this year, they look so much better. We saw him obviously way back in Gather Round when he kicked 6 goals. He was really, he was just amazing in that game. And it almost looked like they could start Sydney's season, but I don't know if he's injured or something, but that just really cost Sydney in the end, his form throughout the rest of the year. But yeah, that was the votes for that one. Next we get to Melbourne versus Brisbane. I don't know what Brisbane done here. They had this game locked up with 7 minutes to go, and they cost a 4-goal lead and gave Melbourne the win. People can say that Eric Hipwood took that mark, but honestly, I think it would have been a quarter ball up anyway. I think it was pretty much both players had handled the ball, and also you shouldn't be giving up a 4-goal lead with 7 minutes to go. That was poor from Brisbane. They finally had a game at the MCG where they should win, and they shot themselves in the foot. It was really quite embarrassing, really, from Brisbane. But anyway, the 3-2-1 votes. This was a close one, but I did give Max Gawn the 3 votes, 2 votes to Christian Petrarca, and the 1 vote to Joe Danaher. Max Gawn got it for me because this is the Max Gawn that the Melbourne Demons want to see. They don't want to see him up forward. I think that Max Gawn is actually a pretty capable forward, but this is what his role is. He's a sole ruckman. I don't know what they're going to do at Brodie Grundy. We'll get into that maybe. No, you know what? Brodie Grundy, if he decides to leave, that's a real weak act, in my opinion. If he wants to leave after 1 year instead of trying to fight for his spot back in the Melbourne lineup, I think that's pretty weak. He had a chance to go to a club that didn't have a ruckman, but he decided to go to Melbourne, which, I mean, I don't know why he did to begin with if he didn't want to fight for it. But we'll have to see what happens with that. I still think that Max Gawn was brilliant in this game. He was all around the ground, and it was just what Melbourne wanted him to be for the rest of his career, probably. After that, we get to Christian Petrarca with the 2 votes. He was very good as well. He's kicking goals now, which I think is one of the reasons why he's a chance for he could be a chance for a Brownlow. If it wasn't for Nick Dacos, I think he's right up there. But Christian Petrarca has been brilliant, especially the last few weeks. Even against St Kilda last week, he was very close to get votes in that game. But yeah, he was brilliant in that one. And the 1 vote I did give to Joe Danaher. However, he probably could have got the win for him if he kicked straight. He kicked 2 goal 3, and it just costs him at stages with Joe. He can be one of the best players in the game at times, and sometimes he can be the most useless player on the field. And I don't think it's ever going to change with his career. I mean, everyone's been wanting him to do that for his whole career. You know, you need to make your bad game still reasonable, but he's still got these highs and his huge lows. So I don't know what Joe Danaher's going to do. He was brilliant in that game and almost got the Lions over the line, but if he kicked straight, he would have got him there. So wasn't good enough from Joe for him for a lot of games this season, but this game he nearly got him over the line. So you got to give him credit for that. Hopefully they get Josh Dunkley back soon, the Lions, and that should help them towards their finals push. But yeah, that's for that game. After that, we get to the Pies versus the Dockers, and honestly, this game was just the second quarter. When the Pies knocked on 10 goals in the quarter, that was basically a game done. They did very well, the Pies, in this one. I don't think Fremantle could have done much better, honestly. I wasn't expecting much from the Dockers, and I think now, honestly, my ladder predictor says they've got on 10 wins, and that's a lot of them because they're at home. But they're in a real hole, Fremantle. They had that 4-week or 5-week burst in the middle of the season when they beat Sydney and they beat Melbourne. But since then, they've been really poor. Now, they get Sarong back this week, so maybe they'll be a little bit better in the midfield against the Swans. But other than that, they've been pretty poor, Fremantle. But nonetheless, let's get to the votes. 3-2-1 votes. 3 votes went to Taylor Adams, 2 votes to Nick Dacos, and the 1 vote to Jamie Elliott. Nick Dacos is very close here, but I gave it to Taylor Adams because I think he was there when the game was there to be won. Nick Dacos definitely racked them up towards the end of the game as well, but Taylor Adams was very good especially in the first half, and was pretty good in the second half. He kicked a few goals as well, and I do think that a midfielder who kicks goals is a lot more valuable than 35 touches. So that's why I gave him the 3 votes. But nonetheless, Nick Dacos is in some brilliant form. I don't know if there's been a player in the second year that's won the Brownlow Award that's been 19 years of age in a very long time. So I think Nick Dacos has almost got that wrapped up at this stage. He's very close to it in the Boundary Riders medal as well, by the way, guys, if anyone's really interested. Actually, speaking of that, we probably won't be doing many more vote segments on this from round 21 on to round 24. Just so we make a little bit of surprise when we do the countdown at the end of the season. Probably, I can't remember if the Brownlow's in the middle of I don't think it's in the bye week anymore, is it? I think it's at the end of the season, the grand final week. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but maybe we'll do it in the bye week as well, because that'd be kind of cool. But anyway, back to the votes. And Jamie Elliott got the 1 vote. He's in some really good form at the moment, Jamie Elliott, kicking goals. And he got 4 again against Fremantle. If he can get on a roll as well, Jamie Elliott, towards the end of the season, we saw how valuable he was to Collingwood last year. He hasn't really been to his best until about the last month or so, but if he hits that stride, they've just got another dimension to Collingwood's dangerous team that they've got. So he's really up there now. Jamie Elliott is one of the best small forwards in the game at the moment. I mean, everyone talks about Charlie Cameron, but he's up there, Jamie Elliott. He's a very good player, and I think he's very underrated as well. Considering he's at Collingwood, it's very hard to be underrated there. But anyway, next up we get to the Gold Coast versus St Kilda. We talked a little bit about it before. Our Ross Lyon was very disappointed by St Kilda, but I mean, no words can say how bad they were. They were very bad. They only kicked 8 goals in the whole game, 2 goals to half-time. The Gold Coast, they responded after the Stuart Dew sacking, which I think was pretty poor from the club, to be fair. But Stephen King gets a win on his first game. 3-2-1 vote. Sam Flanders with the 3, Will Powell with the 2, and Rory Atkins with the 1. Noah Anderson was pretty close here with the vote. I did give it to Rory Atkins, though, because he did have quite a good influence off that half-back wing role. Will Powell's been brilliant in defence all year for the Gold Coast. That's why I think Stuart Dew was a little bit unlucky as well, because whoever gets that job at the Gold Coast, if it's Damien Hardwick or whoever, I think they've just got the list to just get them to a final series very easily. They've got a very good list, the Gold Coast. It's unfortunate that Stuart Dew couldn't get the potential that he could have got out of this club, but I think whoever gets this Gold Coast head coaching role is going to have an assortment of choices to take with this lineup to push him forward. But Sam Flanders was very good in this game, and if he wants to get traded to a different club, he's played some really good footy over the past month, so he's definitely rising his stakes towards maybe moving to a Victorian club at the end of the year. We talked about that in the trade rumours video a couple of weeks ago, so Sam Flanders is definitely a real chance to be moving clubs, and if not, they've got a bit. Whoever gets that coaching role at the Gold Coast has definitely got a midfielder on their hands, and definitely one up there. Probably not as to the quality or talked about like Rao and Anderson, but he could definitely put some, talking points towards moving to a midfield role for the Gold Coast next year, or for the rest of the season at least. After that, we get to what probably was the upset of the round in Carlton versus Port Adelaide. Carlton beat Port Adelaide by a good margin, 50 points, and this was a very surprising one for a lot of people. However, I'm not exactly 100% surprised about it. I think he even said it in the podcast last week. I think Carlton have a bit of a chance because of their tall forwards. Now, obviously, Harry Mackay went down very early in this game, so it was a little bit surprising that Carlton did get on the board, like 18 goals. But we've got to give some credit, even though he didn't get in the votes, though. I've got to give it to Jesse Motlop, who came in as a late in. He kicked 4 goals in the first half and really was sparked Carlton up forward, and he was brilliant in the first half for Carlton. And I don't know, it's interesting because people would say that Carlton are back, and it's kind of hard to argue against them now because, they're beaten second on the ladder and the informed team of the comp. They were 13 wins, obviously, in a row, Port Adelaide. But you can't really dispute Carlton now. I had them out of the 8 and 15th, I believe, 6 weeks ago, and now I have them in the 8. So Carlton's percentage, because they beat Port so convincingly, and they've beaten West Coast very well as already in the season by over 100 points, it's hard to have anything against Carlton. They're a real chance now of making the 8. I don't know if they can really make any damage in the 8 because I just feel like they beat Port, but they beat Port Adelaide at their worst. They had 7 outs. They didn't even have Charlie Dixon or Jason Horne-Francis, who have been very good this year for Port Adelaide. So I give Port Adelaide a mulligan in this game, to be fair, but I've got to give it to Carlton. They were brilliant in this game, and they ended Port Adelaide's streak, so you've got to give them credit for that. And now Port Adelaide's doesn't get much easier with a game against Collingwood this week. But with the 3-2-1 vote, you give the 3 votes to Jack Silvani, 2 votes to Paddy Cripps, and the 1 vote to Dan Houston. Jack Silvani, this is what they want him for. He needs to play forward, and to kick 4 goals in this game, he was very good as well. I don't know if he can keep this form because he just seems to lose it as soon as he gets a good game in. So, hopefully for Carlton fans, he can hold this sort of form and play brilliantly for the rest of the season. And at this stage, I just don't know what he's just a question mark, I think, all the time. He's always in and out of this team, and I just don't know what they're going to do with him. But hopefully he can hit a good vein of form towards the end of the season. Paddy Cripps, this is the season that he had last year. This is a game that we've finally seen from him this year, that he's played well. I feel like a lot of this season he's been very poor, but he led from the front a lot of times this game and got him, arguably held his team above Port Adelaide for the majority of the match. Everyone thought that Port would come back, but they just never could. And Paddy Cripps is definitely one of those people who just held Carlton in front for the majority of it. And 1 vote I did give to Dan Houston. He had 41 touches. He was very good in this game, Dan Houston, and has had a very good month. He obviously had that game against Essendon, where he kicked the winner, and he's had a very good month outside of that as well. So I've got to give the 1 vote to Dan Houston, but Port Adelaide, I think, to be fair, I think it was coming. You can't really say it wasn't. They were very close in a lot of games like Essendon, and they were pretty much due for a loss. So I'll give them a little bit of a mulligan. However, if they lose against Collingwood, that's 2 losses in a row, and they don't have the worst end to the season. But at this stage, if they do lose a few more, they could be going into the finals with a very underdone team. They won't have the most amount of confidence going into the finals if they lose a few more, Port Adelaide. But at this stage, I'm giving them a mulligan. I actually picked them against Collingwood this week, which we'll go into a little bit later. But yeah, at this stage, Port Adelaide, I still think are very well up there as second favourites going into the finals if they, keep this sort of form. After that, we get to Geelong versus Essendon. I watched this game live for 3 quarters. I couldn't even do it at the end. It was so poor from Essendon. I kind of agree with Kane Corns. Get him off the ground. Zach Merritt, you've had 200 games. A brilliant player this season, but just get off the ground, bro. You lost by 77 points. Don't fuss around. But anyway, Geelong were very good, but it was down at home. You can't really say too much. I don't get what... Look, I think I said it in the broadcast that they're going to be a bit strong going into finals. You don't want to go up against them. But they're not at their best. I'm sorry. They've beaten Essendon down in Geelong. They beat everyone down in Geelong. It's not that big a deal at this point. They've got to beat some clubs away. And there is 2 games they have this... They have 4 3 games the rest of the season down in Canadian Park. And one of them is against Port Adelaide. So they probably win that game. They've got 1 game at Docklands against St Kilda, and then they've got 2 games against Brisbane and Collingwood for the rest of the season. Brisbane is at the Gabba, and that's this week, obviously, and then they've got Collingwood, I think, in round 22 at the MCG. They've got to win those games to prove to me that they're actually a chance this season, because at this stage, they have beaten a lot of clubs around them by a lot. Sorry, a lot of teams below them by a lot, and they're beating teams around them pretty well, but they're not beating the top teams. They've got to play against these top teams to prove to me that they're actually a club that I can consider, worthy of a finals or a premiership berth at this stage. But they were very good in this game. I'm sorry I'm ranting on a little bit. But the 3-2-1 votes, 3 votes Tom Hawkins, 2 votes Brian Myers, and the 1 vote to Tom Atkins. Tom Hawkins, 5 goals. He was always going to dominate against Essendon's defence. They're always just a bit undersized, and I think that's what the Bombers are going to be going for in the off-season. Brian Myers signed a new deal, kicked the first goal of the game, was brilliant in this one, especially when the game was there. Sorted to be won after, halfway through the second quarter. This game was gone pretty early. But he was very good. Always the goal assist king. I don't know why Jared Whateley said that he was close to Lionel Messi. I think, bro, relax. I don't even know if he made that tweet. I think there was a whole hullabaloo over Twitter, but who cares, Jared? You're fucking old. Who cares? Shut your mouth. But nonetheless, and Tom Atkins, he's one of my favourite players to watch at the moment. He's brilliant as a defensive runner in the midfield, and I'm surprised he hasn't been in there a little bit earlier. He wasn't there a little bit last year, but he kind of got pushed out towards the end of the season, and he has been good this season, especially over the past 6 weeks for Tom Atkins, so he was good to watch. After that, we get to the GWS versus Adelaide, and I switched this one over on the stream halfway through the third quarter, basically at 3/4 time of the Essendon game. And the Giants looked gone. I thought, the Crows will just, hold this lead pretty well, maybe even increase it at Adelaide Oval towards the end of the match. But the Giants, they are a good team to watch at the moment. If you are an AFL fan, don't have a team to watch, the Giants are up there as a team to watch. They play some good footy. Sam Taylor is one of the best defenders in the comp right now, if not the best. I know Darcy Moore's up there, but he is playing some decent footy. He was very unlucky not to get votes here. And the Crows, I think, shot themselves in the foot. I think they may miss finals off this game. But we get to the votes. 3-2-1. 3 votes to Toby Green, 2 votes to Josh Kelly, and the 1 vote to Jordan Dawson. I'm going to go with Jordan Dawson to talk about first. He was lucky to get these votes. The only reason why I did give it to him because he was the best player for the Crows by far, and he kept them. He was definitely trying to drag them over the line in that last quarter. I feel like he was one of the few players that was. And I think he's been very good as captain this year. He's been one of the better captains, I think, of the season. But he just couldn't get his team over the line, unfortunately. Josh Kelly, 2 votes. He was very good and stood up with the loss of Tom Green on the Friday night, I believe, on the Friday, after the teams came out. So he was very good. And he kicked that goal in the 4th quarter, which was a brilliant finish outside 50. And there were 3 votes to Toby Green. Look, I'm as a Swan supporter, I'm not a big fan of him a lot of times, but I can't sit there and say that he's a poor player. He is very good, and he's been good this year. Taking the responsibility as the captain, I think, has definitely given him a new lease on his AFL career as well. He's not making those stupid mistakes and pushing players and, doing all that shit. He's actually playing his AFL footballer, and he's showing that he's one of the best in the comp. And he may not have had the most amount of disposals or most amount of goals in this game, but his influence in that last quarter and towards the end of the third quarter was brilliant and got his team over the line. So that's why I gave him the 3 votes. After that, we get to Sunday. First game was North Melbourne versus Hawthorn. One for the highlight reels for a lot of years, obviously. But nonetheless, Hawthorn just couldn't kick straight in the first half. They straightened up in the second half and got the win. Have North Melbourne even improved from last year? Have they? I mean, I know Alistair Clarkson's not there to help them, but far out, dude. They are a shocking team. They are, look, if West Coast weren't doing so poorly right now, North Melbourne would be talked about a lot more. They are very lucky that West Coast are the biggest basket case we've seen in, 10 years or whatever. But anyway, Hawthorn were quite good. They got James Sicily back, which is always going to help them towards their development in defence. They only conceded 6 goals. You got to give them credit for that. I just don't know if I just don't know if North Melbourne are really going to do anything in the next couple of years. I mean, I think they said 5 years and we'll make finals. they haven't got a lot on their side. I mean, one is Davis Uniacke, who played quite well. Bailey Scott, who was quite good off the wing. Nick Larkey's obviously going to be a star, but other than that, there's not a lot to talk about, in my opinion, for the future. Sorry, Harry Sheasel as well. And Wardlaw, who got injured, by the way, unfortunately. But yeah, there's not a lot to talk about for North Melbourne. They're gonna be struggling for a few more years. Anyway, we're not here to talk about North Melbourne's future. Anyway, the votes. 3, 2, 1. James Warple got the 3. Jarman Impey with the 2. And Luke Davis-Uniacke with the 1. James Warple was brilliant in this game as well. It's just been a little bit unfortunate he hasn't been able to reach those huge heights that he had a few years ago when he won the best and fairest at Hawthorn. So it's a bit unfortunate, but he was very good in this one. Brilliant in the middle. He's a strong midfielder. He's definitely going to be a star for the Hawthorn midfield in the years to come. Jarman Impey has hit some rich vein of form in the past 5 weeks off half-back. He's finally found a role for himself, and I think it's really good to see that he's that running defender. I mean, I guess it is because Jaff isn't in the lineup at the moment, but Jarman Impey, I think, just needs to play that role. He came from Port Adelaide. He was they couldn't find him a spot either. He was like a small forward for a bit, then a small defender. But he's a runner. Give him the ball, he's going to run, he's going to get you a meterage, he's going to get you the ball forward. And I think that's his role. And then Luke Davis-Uniacke, look, he was one of the few shining lights that North Melbourne had, and he was very good in this game in the middle. He tried to drag his team somewhat closer, but there's only so much he can do as a midfielder. And to be honest, if I'm another club, I'm trying to offer him the big bucks to get him out of there. If I'm North Melbourne, I'm paying him a lot of money to stay, but at this moment, he couldn't be that happy, could he? I mean, I guess he's got age on his side. He's got a lot of years left, so he can wait some time. But there's always that lure of a premiership at another club, and I don't see North Melbourne giving any sort of shake towards that in the next 5 years at least. But finally, we get to the final game of the round. Obviously, West Coast versus Richmond. West Coast, look, they didn't get flogged by 100 points, so you got to give them credit for that. Only 38, and I think that, to be honest, that's not very good for Richmond at all. That could have actually given them a real percentage booster going towards the end of the season, and they didn't take it. They kicked 14 goals, 14. They kicked straighter. They very well take a really good win here, take a 60-plus point win. They only win by 38 in the end. I don't know. The Tigers, they're pushing towards finals, but I just think they've made their run a little bit too late, and I think West Coast are still in a hole. I mean, they're still losing. That's what I said against St Kilda when they lost again. They lost by a few points. And then the next week against Brisbane, they got flogged by 80. So, anyway, West Coast, they're in a hole. They're going to have to rebuild. And they almost have to cull to the point like where Hawthorn did. And maybe they will go fully, but I don't know. They still don't want to drop their senior players. They did drop Andrew Gaff down to a sub in that game. But he came on pretty early because Jinby got injured, unfortunately. So, he did play okay, Andrew Gaff. But they're too afraid to drop these big players and make a statement. So, it's a bit strange, but, I'm not the West Coast coach, so who am I to tell? Anyway, 3, 2, 1 votes. So 3 votes went to Shea Bolton, 2 votes to Dustin Martin, and the 1 vote to Tim Taranto. Shea Bolton has hit some form. He has hit some real good form for Richmond at the moment. Playing off the midfield now, he's not playing off half forward, he's not a small forward. He's playing in a role where he can make the most impact, which is in the middle. And he should stay there for the rest of his career. He is a brilliant player in there. And he got him the win against Sydney last week, and he's helping his team, push towards this late finals push. So you got to really appreciate that if you're a Richmond fan. Dusty got the 2 votes. If he kicked straighter, he would have got the 3. He's hit some form, Dusty, and I'm a bit surprised because I thought his career was done. When I saw him at Gather Round against the Swans, I was thinking career over. I mean, he had a good career, don't get me wrong, obviously. But I think now he's definitely hitting something. I don't know what he's taken. But not saying he's taking drug. I'm not saying that. But he's definitely hit some form, Dusty, and it's good to see. I mean, I think he's one of the best players that I've seen ever play the game, probably behind Gary Ablett Jr., so, yeah, in that form that he had around 2017 to 2020, 21, I don't think I've seen many players as good as that. And it's good to see he's not hit that form, but he's definitely hit some form that's helping Richmond push towards finals. And the one about Tim Taranto, I guess some people could have given him the 3. I gave it to Shea Bolton and Dusty just before. I thought it had a little more impact. But Tim Taranto, he's had an off couple of weeks, but it's good to see him get back into a little bit of form now. And if they are to make finals to Tigers, he's going to have to hit that form as well. So that is my votes for this week, guys. Like I said, we will be doing a votes countdown at the end of the season, and who knows, maybe I'll do something stupid and give someone a medal. Maybe I'll send one of those medals out like to a club and something and see what happens. That'd be kind of funny, I think. But nonetheless, guys, now we get to the tips for round 19. Now, of course, round 19's actually got some massive games in it. We've got Port Adelaide, Collingwood. We've got Brisbane versus the Geelong. Even Fremantle versus Sydney to an extent could be a big one. We've also got things like Melbourne and Adelaide down there as well. So we've got some big games to go through. So we'll go through them right now. So first game, Essendon Bulldogs. This is going to be a big one. Bulldogs aren't in the best of form right now, but they are a response team. So it'll be interesting how the Bulldogs go, but also Essendon have to respond after that terrible performance against Geelong. They haven't really lost a lot of by big margins this year, Essendon. So they've done really well on that facet. I'll be interested to see how the young Bombers can actually respond against the Bulldogs. I'm actually going to tip them. I think the Bombers are just a little bit more evolved than the Bulldogs. I think that the Bombers as well have a pretty good pressure team, which I think can lock down the handball game of the Bulldogs. So I'm going to give Essendon the win here. However, if the Bulldogs get on the outside with their handball, I think they win this one pretty comfortably. So I think this will be a close one if Essendon win. If the Bulldogs win, I think they win by a good 5 goals. After that, we get to Saturday afternoon, Richmond versus Hawthorn. I think Richmond might win this one pretty well. However, with James Sicily back, I do actually give Hawthorn a lot of chance towards the end of the season when James Sicily's in the team. I know it's only one player, but he just gives so much to the Hawthorn lineup. But I do think that Richmond will win this one. I think they'll be a little bit disappointed with their game against the West Coast Eagles, not being able to capitalise on a percentage boost. And if Richmond are to make the finals this year, they have to beat a couple of teams like Hawthorn, like North Melbourne later in the year. They have to win them really well. So I'm going to pick Richmond in this one, and I think they win this one pretty comfortably. I don't really see an upset brewing at the MCG. After that, we get to Carlton versus West Coast. This is definitely not going to be an upset. Carlton are going to win this one. They're going to get a percentage booster by, I think they win this one by 50, 60, 70 plus points, and that's being generous to West Coast. They win this one well, Carlton, and they give themselves a real chance towards finals because they're getting quite a lot of percentage in the last few weeks, and this is just going to be another percentage booster. I give them a real chance towards that push towards finals now too. After that, we get to Brisbane versus Geelong. This is at the Gabba, Saturday twilight, massive game. If Geelong want to prove to me that they're a real chance towards a finals, challenger, premiership push, they have to win this game. They've been beating a lot of teams around them, down at Cardinia Park, down at home, beating up the little brother at home. They've got to win these games away, and they've got to win against these premiership contenders like Brisbane. I am tipping Brisbane in this game. I think they would be pretty disappointed by that last 7 minutes against Melbourne. They want to respond from that. And I think they win this one. Probably a close one, probably. I don't see Geelong getting flogged by any means, but I think Brisbane will, bounce back from their pretty poor performance against Melbourne in those past few minutes. So I give Brisbane a 20-point win pretty well here. I think that Geelong need to prove to me that they can win these sort of games. And to be fair, it'll be interesting who Jack Payne goes to. If he goes to Cameron, I think he would. But also, this is going to be interesting if Harris Andrews will be playing on Tom Hawkins because he can't play that, intercept marking play. He'll have to play on Tom Hawkins. You can't let him go. So if Geelong can get on top as the tall forwards, they have a bit of a chance. But I'm going to pick Brisbane. After that, we get to Saturday night, which is Fremantle versus Sydney. Now, I think this game would be a little bit more talked about if it wasn't for the other Saturday night game, which we'll get to in a minute. But Fremantle really need to respond. They've been poor the last few weeks. They've got the Swans who are in okay form. I mean, they beat the Bulldogs, but they're not in the best of form. Last year when these two teams met was a big game. Really decided who was going to make the top 4 in the up at Optus. It looks like Buddy will be going up to Sydney. I'll be interested to see if Sydney will line up with Ruckman this week because they didn't line up Tom Hickey, but he did play well in the VFL. So I'll be surprised if they don't because Darcy and Jackson are a really big combination. So I think they will play Hickey. But if they don't, I give Fremantle a real chance to flog Sydney, to be honest, if they don't play Ruckman. But at this stage, I am going to pick Fremantle at home. They need to respond, and if they don't, I think Justin Longmuir is going to have a really tough week inside the media in the bubble of Perth. So I think Fremantle win this one pretty well. After that, we get to the game of the round, game of the season lined up so far. Second versus first, Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide versus Collingwood. This is going to be a massive game. Both teams hate each other. Adelaide Oval, prime time. I don't know what else I can say. It's going to be a massive game. And I'm so annoyed that the Swans are playing at the same time. I'm so angry. I'd love to watch this game. I think it's going to be a finals preview. I think, honestly, if these two teams can keep their form that they've had for the majority of the season, they play in the grand final. But at this stage, at Adelaide Oval, I'm going to pick Port. But Collingwood, very hard to tip against them. This is 50-50 in my opinion. I know on the ESPN app right now, it is Collingwood by 65% to 35. I'm surprised by that. But the money odds are pretty close. Everything else is very close. I'm going to pick Port because it's at Adelaide Oval. That's the only reason. And Port do need to respond from last week. They were very poor against Carlton. So I think Port Adelaide will respond here, and I think they beat Collingwood. After that, we get to Sunday. First game is GWS versus Gold Coast, the expansion clubs. Look, the Gold Coast responded last week, but I don't think they do it again. The Giants are in such good form. If the Giants want to make finals, they have to win this one. And to be honest, I think they look for a little bit of a percentage booster, to be fair. I think that they can get the Gold Coast and get them at a good stage. I think that they got a good win against the Saints, but I think that's as much as their, hype around Stephen King's going to go. I think the Giants win this one pretty well. I don't know if they get Tom Green back. It was a hamstring for the reason why he was out. So I think they may miss him a little bit here because the Gold Coast's probably best line is their midfield. But I think the Giants win this one pretty convincingly. After that, we get to probably the biggest game on the Sunday, which is Melbourne versus the Crows. At Adelaide Oval, this one would be interesting. But with Melbourne at the MCG, I think they're just going to be too good for the Crows. They just can't play away from home. However, the Crows have been reaching a lot of scrutiny this week. They've obviously seen Josh Rochelli receive a lot of scrutiny for that hit behind the play. A lot of players very underperforming in the last quarter when they needed them most. The Crows have been known as a response team in the past, but I think Melbourne will win this one. I think Christian Petrarca can get it on top in the midfield and he can kick some goals, which I don't really know if the Crows have a real answer for. So I think the Demons will win that one pretty well. And then the final game of the round is St Kilda versus North Melbourne. Now, I think a lot of people would probably say this is a bit of a danger game for the Saints. And it is to an extent, but I don't think North Melbourne are playing anywhere near well enough to beat a team, anyone other than the West Coast right now. They're playing really poor footy, North Melbourne. Alistair Clarkson comes back, I think, in a few weeks, if not the end of the season, which I think it's like, bro, just take the rest of the season off. Do you want to really be there for this debacle? Just let Brett Ratton take the reins. Just let him suffer the consequences. I'm sorry, I'm being mean. But Christ's sake, St Kilda win this one, I think, and I think they win it pretty well. Nonetheless, I don't know if that exactly means they're going to make finals from it, but if they are to make finals, St Kilda, they need to get some percentage off this game. So they need to go and win this one well. But I don't know, maybe North Melbourne pull out a rabbit out of the hat and actually win this game, which I just don't see happening. But who knows? It could happen. But nonetheless, guys, we get to the last segment of today's podcast, which is the AFL Fantasy wrap-up, we'll call it, because I don't know, I was just stalling to try and find it on my phone. Anyway, this week I scored very poorly. I scored 2,193. I had some poor scores. I had Zach Merritt, 80. I had Brad Crouch, who I brought in late because I'm an idiot. I got 89. I got Lockie Neal on 75. I had Kieran Briggs, who is good, okay, but he didn't get 140, so I'm annoyed. Jack McRae got 71. Zach Butters got 68. He got injured, though, so I may have to get rid of him, so great. Ben Hobbs has also got 63. I had to keep... I had Tom Green and Caleb Sarong both out. I had to keep them both, which means that I had to have Hewitt's score of 40 in my team. So I just had a shit week. I thought it all started off brilliantly. I had Bontempelli as my vice-captain. He scored 142. I put him as my captain. He got 284. That was the highlight of my round and the only highlight. It was terrible. I was very annoyed. But anyway, I did go to my trades this week. This is what they are at this stage. I don't know if they're going to stay the same. I got rid of Ben Hobbs finally. He's been very good, but with Darcy Parish back, I think he's just lost his points, unfortunately. And I've picked up Tom Atkins. Now, he's actually been very good in the past 4 of the past 5 weeks. 4 of the past 5 weeks, he's actually been really good. He scored over 80 in 4 of those games. He did score a 40 against Port Adelaide, which made me a little bit concerned. But now that he's got that midfield role, it doesn't look like he's tagging too much as he was those first few weeks. But he's now holding a role as that midfielder. And I think, because I'm putting him in defence, I think he's good for 80. I'm going to be getting him in there as like a little bit of a stepping stone towards the rest of my team. Because now with a couple of injuries around, I just have to be a little bit careful. So Caleb Daniels gone forward for me because I'm going to have to get rid of Caleb Daniels soon. It's bloody annoying. They won't put him in the midfield. He was playing so good in there, and the Bulldogs were doing pretty good. And then they've chucked him to, like, half forward. Like, what are they doing with their best midfielders? Chucking him to half forward, for Christ's sake. Bloody annoying. Anyway, also got rid of Tom Green for Christian Petrarca at this stage. I just think because he's out with a hamstring, Tom Green, I don't see him coming back in the next week or two. So I think it's just time I have to get rid of him. Christian Petrarca, I am a little bit concerned that he's playing a little bit more forward now, so it's not as like he's getting those touches. But he's kicking goals, and he did have about 5 clearances in that last game. So I'm giving him a benefit of the doubt. He's probably the best midfielder other than Andrew Brayshaw. So I may change it to Andrew Brayshaw towards the end of the week. But at this stage, I'm going to keep it as Christian Petrarca. But yeah, guys, that is the Boundary Riders podcast for episode 20. A little bit of a longer one this week, but yeah, again, my brother's away, so, it's alright. He's, got work. That's fair enough. I'm going to try and get him on for streams and stuff, so, he's here. Because I think, hopefully we can do some podcasts towards the end of the year, especially moving towards the finals. But yeah, guys, there's only 6 weeks to go before we hit finals time. Make sure to let me know down below if you think your team will make the finals this year. If you think my rest of the season prediction was pretty much on the money, or if you believe I'm completely off base, make sure to let me know. Thanks for watching episode 20 of the Boundary Riders podcast, and I will catch you all next time.